Hi, this is Chuck Stevens, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the December 3rd issue of the New York Times here on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Suspect in National Guard shooting enters a not guilty plea. Ramana Lakanwal, who is accused of killing a National Guard member and gravely wounding another, appeared in court remotely from a hospital bed. The man accused of shooting two members of the National Guard, one fatally, in Washington last week, entered a plea of not guilty on Tuesday, appearing in court remotely from a hospital bed. The initial appearance in Washington was a first step in the government's efforts to prosecute Ramana Lakanwal, 29, a refugee from Afghanistan, days after the death of one of the National Guard members he is accused of shooting. Since the shooting, the Trump administration has seized on the attack to propose an extraordinary ban on legal immigration, barring people from much of the world from entering the United States. Appearing in District of Columbia's local city court, prosecutors said they would charge Mr. Lakanwal with first-degree murder, assault, and 2 additional weapons charges. President Trump and Jeanine Pirro, the U.S. Attorney for District of Columbia, have pledged to pursue more serious federal charges that could carry the death penalty, including terrorism charges. Ms. Pirro said after the hearing that the government was still investigating and might later bring federal charges. According to court documents, Mr. Lakanwal was shot during a gunfight with a National Guardsman before his arrest. Ms. Pirro said that Mr. Lakanwal was expected to recover from his injuries and that the government had not decided whether to seek the death penalty. She said the choice would be left to Pam Biondi, the Attorney General. This is a very weighty decision, she said. That is the decision that comes later in time. Terrence Austin, a public defender representing Mr. Lakanwal, told the judge presiding on Tuesday that the government had essentially politicized the case through its public comments about Mr. Lakanwal, potentially tainting the jury pool against him before he had a chance to defend himself in court. He asked that Mr. Lakanwal, who appeared to have no known criminal history before the shooting, be released while awaiting trial. Renee Raymond, the D.C. Superior Court magistrate judge, said the circumstances of the shooting left no combinations of conditions by which Mr. Lakanwal could be released. He came across country armed with a specific purpose in mind, she said, adding that the sheer terror that resulted and that continues to animate because of his actions led her to conclude Mr. Lakanwal should be denied bail. In court documents filed on Tuesday, another member of the West Virginia National Guard described witnessing Mr. Lakanwal screaming Allah Akbar, Arabic for God is greatest, while firing a gun blocks from the White House. The Guard member was talking to the 2 victims in the moments before they were shot and saw them fall to the ground, according to court documents. Detective Joshua Branson, with the Metropolitan Police Department in D.C., wrote in court documents that surveillance footage showed Mr. Lakanwal standing outside a metro station in Washington for about a minute before running toward an intersection. Other surveillance footage shows him rounding a corner and firing at the 2 Guard members, as well as an Army National Guard major who was not shot and later jumped on Mr. Lakanwal while he was trying to reload his gun and hoped to detain him. The 2 West Virginia National Guard members shot in the attack were Army Specialist Sarah Beckstrom, age 20, who was killed, and Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, age 24, who was injured and remains in the hospital. The violence last week has continued to reverberate in Washington. The Trump administration has ordered hundreds more National Guardsmen to join the more than 2,000 troops already stationed around the city before the shooting. A federal court is expected to decide as soon as this week whether to allow the deployment to remain in the city indefinitely after a lower court judge had previously declared the deployment illegal and had given the federal government until December 11th to pull troops out. At the same time, Mr. Trump has made the attack and Ms. Beckstrom's ensuing death the basis for a sweeping prohibition on refugee admissions. Immediately after the shooting, the president said the United States had stopped processing immigration applications from Afghanistan, blaming the shooting on a program created by former President Joseph R. Biden Jr. for Afghan nationals leaving their country after the government fell to the Taliban. On Thanksgiving, Mr. Trump threatened to place a permanent pause on migration from all third world countries, making racially charged promises to denaturalize migrants who undermine domestic tranquility and are non-compatible with Western civilization. Shown on two television screens in the courtroom, Mr. Lackenwall was propped up on a hospital bed, covered in a white blanket, his head resting on a pillow. He's expected to be moved to a jail after he is released from the hospital. During the hearing, he moved his head side to side periodically and told the judge through a Pashto interpreter that he understood his rights. At one point, Mr. Lackenwall began to describe his own injuries. "I cannot open my eyes. I have pain," he said, through the interpreter, before his lawyer advised him not to speak further. After the hearing concluded, Ms. Pirro asked an officer in the courtroom if she could meet with the magistrate judge who had denied Mr. Lackenwall bail. The two met briefly out of view of the public. Ms. Pirro said later that she had simply introduced herself and thanked the judge before Judge Raymond returned to the bench to hear other cases. Ms. Pirro stated repeatedly that the government knew very little about Mr. Lackenwall, predicting that more details would come out through the investigation. This individual was brought into this country as a result of the largest of the American people and the American government, and he betrayed us by shooting and killing one individual, she said. Judge Raymond ordered Mr. Lackenwall to appear for a preliminary hearing on the morning of January 14th. In a related story, Trump's crackdown in wake of shooting blocks legal pathways for migrants. The new measures represent some of the most significant changes to immigration policy, since President Trump returned to the White House. The sweeping crackdown President Trump declared last week after an Afghan national was accused of shooting two National Guard members is poised to radically curtail immigrants from legally entering and living in the United States, putting up roadblocks unparalleled in recent history. Within a matter of days, the administration rolled out a series of far-reaching policy changes, pausing all asylum decisions for migrants currently in the United States, reviewing the green cards that allow people from 19 countries, mostly from the Middle East or Africa, to live and work permanently in the United States, reassessing the asylum approvals issued during the Biden administration, indefinitely halting immigration applications filed by Afghan nationals, and barring Afghans from entering the country. The new rules are poised to potentially upend the status of as many as 1.5 million migrants with pending asylum cases in the country, the more than 50,000 who gained asylum from the Department of Homeland Security under the Biden administration, and untold more who had been hoping to seek refuge in the United States. And Mr. Trump has hinted that further action could come as a result of the attack, floating the possibility of denaturalization or stripping people of citizenship. Taken together, the moves represent some of the most significant changes to immigration policy since he regained office on a platform of substantially curbing the number of people entering the United States and deporting record numbers of migrants. It remains to be seen how the administration will conduct such large-scale reviews of people already living legally in the country, and the federal government cannot easily strip people of their status. But the threat that people could see their cases reopened provoked alarm in a wide array of migrant communities now grappling with the fallout. The U.S. government has never halted such a broad slice of the immigration system or devoted this level of resources to rechecking its own work, said Sarah Pierce, a former Department of Homeland Security official who is now Director of Social Policy at the center-left think tank Third Way. While security reviews are responsible, Ms. Pierce said, this isn't a calibrated security response. It's a sweeping disruption of the legal immigration system at a moment when the administration is looking for somebody to blame. Amanda Barron, a former senior official at U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services during the Biden administration, said she had never heard of the agency pausing asylum requests wholesale in the way the president has ordered. This is blunt force in a way that I have not seen before, she said. Administration officials said the measures were necessary in the wake of Wednesday's shooting, pointing to the fact that the 29-year-old suspect, Mr. Lachenwall, entered the United States in 2021 under a program established by the Biden administration to give quick access to Afghan allies after the Taliban retook their country. The protection of this country and of the American people remains paramount, and the American people will not bear the cost of the prior administration's reckless resettlement policies, said Joe Edlow, the head of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, in a message posted on social media. American safety is non-negotiable. Hundreds of thousands of immigrants from the Middle East and Africa, the Caribbean, and Latin America had already been on alert for months as federal officials slashed refugee numbers, rolled back temporary humanitarian programs, and narrowed the path to asylum in immigration courts, immigration advocates and lawyers have said. Even before the National Guard shooting, migrants from the 19 countries subject to the president's travel ban had been preparing for more stringent reviews of their green card applications after the Trump administration announced it planned to make it harder for them to get that form of approval and other kinds of immigration relief. In Southern California, Ara Torresani, an evangelical pastor and Iranian refugee with U.S. citizenship, said he was worried about members of his congregation, including some who had already been detained after reporting to their asylum case check-ins in recent months. "We don't know what we should do, especially now," said Mr. Torresan, who preaches at the Cornerstone Church in West L.A. "So many people have become threats because of the actions of one person." Mr. Trump has said the pause on asylum requests will continue for a long period of time. "We don't want those people," he told reporters on Sunday about those seeking asylum. In a social media post last week, the president also threatened to strip citizenship from naturalized U.S. citizens who undermine domestic tranquility. Some immigration lawyers and advocates have cautioned against panic over the potential for sizable rollbacks for those who already have legal status, noting that green card holders, asylum grantees, and other long-term legal residents have already had to undergo heavy vetting and meet high legal burdens to obtain forms of relief. Fortunately, this is a nation of laws, and the more status people have, the more rights people have, said Ryan Costello, the policy director at the National Iranian American Council, which lobbies on behalf of Iranian Americans. But it is certainly a time of a lot of uncertainty and concern in the community. Ahalan T. Arlalatham, a law professor with the Center for Immigration Law and Policy at UCLA's School of Law, said the administration would have to meet significant legal burdens for the review to result in people losing their green cards or citizenship, including winning rulings for each individual case in court hearings. The pause on asylum requests filed inside the country, known as affirmative asylum applications, could affect as many as 1.5 million people who had pending applications with USCIS as of June, according to government data. It's unclear how USCIS will conduct a review of so many cases. Now, in recent years, the agency has struggled to lower its backlog of cases, according to the DHS Inspector General. Agency employees have already been tasked with carrying out other mandates issued by the administration, including processing in refugees from South Africa and considering new factors like purported anti-Americanism when considering people's immigration requests. The last major government crackdown on a specific group of migrants in the wake of a violent incident came after the September 11th terrorist attacks. At that time, the Bush administration created a program known as the National Security Entry-Exit Registration System that asked for new registration requirements for immigrants from mostly Middle Eastern countries. The program, which was widely criticized by immigrant advocacy and civil rights groups for being ineffective and unfairly targeting Muslims, was later disbanded during the Obama administration. Concern over the new measures announced by the Trump administration are now reverberating in Afghan immigrant communities and beyond. Noristani Barmudin, 35, who previously worked as a security guard and interpreter at the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, said he was finally approved last year for a special visa program for Afghans that worked with the U.S. government. He and his family arrived in Chicago last August and were issued green cards a few months later. His son has severe autism, and they've since relocated and found a school in Richmond, Virginia that can support him. Now they fear that the little stability they've created will be upended. We are feeling so nervous hearing that they are reprocessing and reinvestigating those who were issued green cards, Mr. Baharmundin said. I'm just trying to be a good person here and to teach my children the same. One woman who fled to Virginia from her native Gambia while pregnant last summer said she sought to escape before her daughter was born and forced to undergo genital mutilation. With her asylum petition now on hold, she said she worried the obstacles to gaining legal status were becoming only harder, particularly for black immigrants. The odds are against us, the woman said, who spoke on condition of anonymity for fear that sharing her name could negatively affect her immigration case. Laura Lim Rodriguez, age 52, a criminal defense lawyer and human rights advocate, and her husband, Rafael Rojas, a former business administrator, said they fled Venezuela 9 years ago after they were targeted over their human rights and political work and their home was ransacked. They entered the U.S. legally and now live in Texas, where they've been awaiting decisions in their asylum petitions. Now they have no idea how long it will take. We completely understand that the U.S. has a duty to secure its people and do security vetting, Ms. Rodriguez said. But at the same time, this pause leaves people like us in a deeper limbo. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Inside Donald Trump's push to make the White House ballroom as big as possible, President Trump's ever-growing vision has caused tension with contractors. His architect has taken a step back as the president personally manages the project. As President Trump took a stroll on the White House roof in August, generating headlines and questions about what he was up to, the man walking beside him was little noticed. Wearing his signature bow tie, James McCreary, a classical architect who runs a small Washington firm known for its work building Catholic churches, was discussing how to execute Mr. Trump's vision for a ballroom on the White House grounds. Mr. McCreary's work has been embraced by conservatives who believe federal buildings should be designed with an eye towards the grandeur of ancient Greek and Roman structures. He often talks of how his design work is carried out in the service of God and the church, according to people who have worked with him. It might seem like an odd pairing, a man who designs cathedrals, working for a man who once built casinos and is now President of the United States. But McCreary Architects got to work on the initial drawings for the project, sketching out a design with high ceilings and arched windows, reminiscent of Versailles Hall of Mirrors. It would have the latest security features, including bulletproof glass. Gold furniture, known to please the president, was added to the renderings. It was flashy enough to impress a man of Mr. Trump's tastes, while largely matching the style of the historic White House without overshadowing it. That's when things got tricky. In offering up his initial design, Mr. McCreary could not have known that Mr. Trump's vision for the project was growing. What started as a 500-seat ballroom connected to the East Wing grew to 650 seats. Next, he wanted a 999-seat ballroom, then room for 1,350. Even as Mr. Trump assured the public in July that the ballroom would not touch the existing structure, he already had approved plans to demolish the East Wing to make way for something that could hold several thousand people, according to 3 people familiar with the timeline. The latest plan, which officials said was still preliminary, calls for a ballroom much larger than the West Wing and the Executive Mansion. Mr. Trump has said publicly that he would like a ballroom big enough to hold a crowd for a presidential inauguration. The size of the project was not the only issue raising alarms. Mr. Trump also told people working on the ballroom that they did not have need to follow permitting, zoning, or code requirements because the structure is on White House grounds, according to 3 people familiar with his comments. The firms involved have insisted on following industry standards. In recent weeks, Mr. McCreary has pulled back from day-to-day involvement in the project. 2 people familiar with the matter told the New York Times. They emphasized that Mr. McCreary was still involved as a consultant on the design and proud to be working for Mr. Trump. The White House official acknowledged that there had been disagreements between Mr. Trump and Mr. McCreary, a dynamic first reported by the Washington Post. Through a representative, Mr. McCreary declined requests for an interview. This account of Mr. Trump's personal drive to undertake one of the most significant renovations in the history of the White House is based on interviews with 5 people with knowledge of the project, most of whom asked for anonymity to discuss private conversations, along with the president's own statements and planning documents released by the White House. For Mr. Trump, who was a builder for years in New York City, and who often brags about his talents in real estate and construction, the White House renovation is a dream project. Mr. Trump has marveled that he does not need to follow the kind of permitting requirements that he faced back in New York. He doesn't need approvals from anyone. He has told those around him and can begin any project at the White House as quickly as he likes. You're the President of the United States. You can do anything you want, Mr. Trump has said he's been told. Mr. Trump has wanted to build a ballroom at the White House for years. During the Obama administration, he pitched the idea of constructing a $100 million version of his Mar-a-Lago ballroom. But Obama associates never followed up on his offer, a slight that has stayed with Mr. Trump. The ballroom Mr. Trump is planning now is more than 4 times as large as the 20,000 square foot one at Mar-a-Lago. Aware of potential resistance to the project, Mr. Trump has pushed to remove any obstacle that could slow down his vision. He has installed his former personal lawyer as chairman of the National Capital Planning Commission, which is supposed to review plans for the project. That lawyer, Will Scharf, has said there was no need to review Mr. Trump's plans before he ordered the demolition of the East Wing. Mr. Trump has also fired the entire board of the Commission of Fine Arts, an independent federal agency that was established by Congress to advise the president on urban planning and historical renovation. Mr. Trump's unilateral approach has raised concerns from the Society of Architectural Historians, which urged that such a significant change to a historic building of this import should follow a rigorous and deliberate design and review process. Mr. Trump is aware of the criticism that his ballroom plans are too large. He told a group of donors to the project last month that he didn't want the new ballroom to dwarf anything, but at the same event, in discussing related plans to construct a triumphal arch, Mr. Trump showed small, medium, and large options. I happen to think the large looks by far the best, he said. The contractors working on Mr. Trump's ballroom included McCreary Architects, Clark Constructions, and AECOM did not go through the traditional government bidding process. Instead, Mr. Trump has been personally selecting each contractor and handling the details of the contracts, including how much the firm will be paid, people with knowledge of the situation said. Mr. Trump selected Mr. McCreary after the architect made his presentation personally in the Oval Office, emphasizing a design that would be in keeping with the existing White House. The building's original designer, James Hoban, was also a church architect. The president has also said that the firm excavating the site initially told him the work would cost $3.2 million, but that he pressured the company to accept $2 million. The short timetable for the project, which the president has said he wants to be completed before 2029, has led to some embarrassing mistakes. The various plans released so far, including a rushed model made by a contractor, have included windows that collide into each other and a staircase to nowhere. Richard W. Longstreth, an architectural historian and a professor at George Washington University, noted that the public had yet to see a final design of the building. He said the ballroom's project success would depend a lot on its execution. I have nothing against the contemporary use of classical architecture if it's done well, he said, and there are people who can do it very well and others who can't. The president initially considered ways to preserve the East Wing, the traditional offices of the First Lady, and the entrance to the White House for millions of Americans on official tours. McCreary Architects provided options to build the ballroom as an addition to the East Wing or construct a new facility over it, but Mr. Trump rejected those plans. Under the latest designs, the offices of the First Lady would be on the ground floor of the proposed ballroom, with a main visitor entrance from the east portico. We started with a much smaller building, and then I realized we have the land, let's do it right, Mr. Trump said recently to donors during an event to raise money for the ballroom project. And so we built a larger building that can really hold just about any function that we want. Many have embraced the idea of Mr. Trump's new ballroom as a benefit to the complex, pointing out problems with hosting large events in tents on White House grounds. Joseph Malchow, who is on the board of the National Civic Arts Society, with Mr. McCreary, said Mr. Trump was leading an effort to restore classical American architecture. Mr. Trump has said taxpayers are not on the hook for the ballroom, whose costs have risen by 50% from $200 million to $300 million. The president has said he already raised $350 million from donors, including from major tech and crypto companies, and that businesses pledged to donate all of the steel and air conditioning. But that payment method means going around Congress to fund the project, cutting legislators out of having any say over its direction. The White House is one of the great buildings in this country. It's the so-called People's Palace, said Richard Guy Wilson, a professor emeritus of architectural history at the University of Virginia. This new ballroom that's going up, it's gigantic, and unfortunately it's going to sort of dominate. The ballroom project is Mr. Trump's latest push to remake the White House in his own image. He's added gold moldings and gold decorations throughout the Oval Office and gold ornaments in the cabinet room. He removed a photo of Hillary Clinton, the former First Lady and Secretary of State, and replaced it with an image of his own face, colored with the American flag. He added marble floors and a chandelier to the palm room. He paved over the rose garden grass to add a patio. Along the West Wing colonnade, he added gold-framed photos of every American president, except his predecessor, Joseph R. Biden, Jr., whom he depicted as an auto pen. Mr. Longstreth noted that many of Mr. Trump's changes could be undone by future presidents. A lot of that is reversible, he said, and presidents have often come in and changed the decoration to a considerable degree. Still, Mr. Trump is showing no signs of stopping. He recently gutted the bathroom in the Lincoln bedroom, posting 24 photos on social media of the renovation, and he has informally discussed undertaking more projects at the White House, including more work on the West Wing. A White House official said that a large-scale renovation of the West Wing was not currently under consideration, but that Mr. Trump would be making more changes. Speaking of the design plans for the new ballroom, Mr. Trump has said that he likes to see different proposals, but that he ultimately has the final say. I consider myself an important designer, Mr. Trump has said. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Private employers cut jobs in November, the latest sign of a slowdown. Data from ADP, a payroll processor, is getting added attention because of delays in official statistics caused by the government shutdown. When the flow of official data ran dry during the federal government shutdown, policymakers worried the drought would make it hard for them to know if the economy took a turn for the worse. But those fears have become a reality. Private employment fell by 32,000 jobs last month. The payroll processing company ADP said on Wednesday it was the third decline in 4 months, and taken at face value would be a clear sign that the labor market, after months of cooling, had entered a new, more worrying phase. But other sources have not shown the same kind of sharp decline, and more authoritative data isn't available because of the lingering effects of the shutdown. The November jobs report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which was scheduled for release on Friday, has been delayed until December 16th, and the government is skipping the October report altogether. Data on inflation, spending, and production have also been delayed. The lack of official data has contributed to divisions among policymakers at the Federal Reserve, who disagree about how to weigh the risk of a weakening labor market against the possibility of worsening inflation. Under federal law, the central bank is responsible for keeping employment high and inflation low. The Fed is widely expected to cut interest rates by 1/4 percentage point at its meeting next week. But the decision is unlikely to be unanimous, with some officials preferring to keep rates steady and at least one wanting a larger cut. The ADP data showed widespread job losses with declines in employment among manufacturers, construction companies, and professional service firms. Losses were concentrated among small businesses, which cut 120,000 jobs, even as larger firms added employees. It is those mom-and-pop Main Street companies, firms, small businesses, and establishments that are really weathering what is an uncertain macro environment and a cautious consumer, Nella Richardson, the chief economist at ADP, said in a call with reporters. I see them as a canary in the coal mine. Ms. Richardson said the latest data was consistent with other evidence of a two-track economy in which wealthy households, buoyed by stock market gains, are spending freely, while lower-income consumers have become more cautious. Businesses aren't hiring as many seasonal workers this year, Ms. Richardson said, and wage growth has slowed, especially at small businesses, which will put more pressure on family budgets. Economists have been watching ADP's data more closely than usual because of the delays in government data, but they warn that ADP's data doesn't fully replace the official statistics. It measures only the private sector, meaning it does not reflect federal job cuts, and ADP's client base, though largely, isn't fully representative of the overall U.S. economy. Other sources suggest the labor market has cooled significantly in recent months, but hasn't taken a sharp turn for the worse. Applications for unemployment insurance have drifted up, but haven't risen sharply. Data from Revelio Labs, LinkedIn, and other sources have shown a slowdown in hiring, but not outright job cuts. Everything that we're continuing to see is showing that the labor market seems to be maintaining its slower but steady overall pace, said Josh Hurt, an economist for Vanguard, which produces its own measure of employment by tracking sign-ups for corporate retirement plans. We're not seeing any further deterioration. So if you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website. It may be a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, or a streaming service too, like your smart speakers. But we also have a dedicated mobile app that can be downloaded to any mobile device. It's free. And all you have to do is go to your Play Store and grab it. And you're off and running. Very simple with one-touch operation. Our next story from the Times today. Shoppers turn to discounts in debt, but not just for holidays. Consumers are focusing on value and financing purchases to complete their shopping lists. American consumers are spending more this holiday season as retailers lure them with bargains. The search for bigger discounts isn't just seasonal, though. A record 203 million consumers shopped during the Thanksgiving weekend. That, according to the National Retail Federation. More than $44 billion was spent online from Thanksgiving through Cyber Monday, up about 8% from last year, data from Adobe Analytics showed. But shoppers struggling with inflation and economic uncertainty have sought out sales and turned to coupon finders and cashback services throughout the year. Feeling stretched by the ripple effects of tariffs and high interest rates, people are stacking discounts and using buy now, pay later at checkout too. Consumers have faced several years of rising costs, and what we're seeing now is resilience turning into strategy, said Magali Darling, the chief commercial officer at Retail Me Not, a company that offers discount coupons and cashback options on some purchases. It's a long-term shift in how consumers approach spending, with a stronger focus on making every dollar work harder. At Retail Me Not, account registrations this year through November jumped 22% from the same period in 2024. Buy now, pay later use has also spiked. Just on Monday, the payment method drove more than $1 billion in online spending, according to Adobe Analytics. The National Retail Federation predicted that retail sales in November and December would exceed $1 trillion for the first time. But that total masks a growing divide in how Americans buy. High-income shoppers are increasing spending at more expensive stores, while middle-income households are turning to value brands. Everything's more expensive, Jo Polison, age 67, said as she made her way into a Kohl's in Branford, Connecticut on Black Friday. She said she usually shopped at the store when there were sales and took advantage of Kohl's Cash, a reward system. But she also frequents TJ Maxx and Marshall's for low-priced items. I'm buying less this year, but I'm looking for more sales, Ms. Polison said. I plan to buy less for family and friends. Visits to other value retailers like Burlington stores, Ross Dress for Less, and Walmart have increased this year, according to data from Placer.ai, a company that analyzes foot traffic at stores. For lower-income households, there's only so much trading down that they can do. But using different discounts or sales, that's shifting the timing of some spending, said Ryan Sweet, the chief U.S. economist at Oxford Economics. But the bulk of consumption is done by everyone in between, and that's an enormous number of people, he added. That's where you're seeing the most trading down occurring. In recent earnings calls, several retailers noted that lower prices were driving business and enticing new customers. Walmart said increased earnings have stemmed in part from the shift toward value items. TJ Maxx said its lower prices were distinguishing it from competitors. At the same time, retailers selling discretionary or luxury items, such as Best Buy and Williams-Sonoma, have increased revenue in recent quarters, suggesting that some consumers will still splurge on big-ticket gifts. Macy's on Wednesday reported better-than-expected sales across its inventory from discounted items to luxury goods. Jean Gargiano, age 65, said outside a shopping center in Branford that she was focusing on smaller purchases for her grandchildren or one larger gift. If one gets a bigger gift, the other one gets two smaller ones, but it equals out in price. Even with a slew of discounts, some consumers are still going beyond their means to afford the holidays. In an August survey by Rakuten and Harris Poll, 24% of respondents with an annual household income below $50,000 expected to add credit card debt to afford seasonal shopping. Klarna, a company that splits payments up over time, saw a 32% rise in users in the 3 months through September compared with the same period in 2024. In July, it released a debit card in the United States that allows users to buy an item at full price or pay over time. As of November, the card had more than 4 million sign-ups, the company said. Through November, buy now, pay later spending this year had reached nearly $80 billion, up 8% from 2024, according to Adobe Analytics. Andrew McManus, 26, said he had relied more on Klarna and Afterpay It's another buy now, pay later provider, as prices had risen. Mr. McManus, who lives in Yonkers, New York, said he would prefer to pay full price, but had to change his shopping habits throughout the year and heading into holiday spending. Prices have just gotten so out of hand within the last year, he said. Retailers have also been putting more products, including food and toys, on sale this holiday season. Online sellers slash prices not just for Black Friday, but also in the weeks leading up to it. Outside a shopping center on Black Friday, Karen Perica, 63, said she had scaled down who we normally would buy for. Facing higher prices throughout the year, she began to use Fetch, a rewards app. She said she planned to pare back her holiday purchases to buy gifts only for the children in her family. Every little bit helps, she said. More now from the New York Times. From the health page, dementia comes in many forms. Alzheimer's is just one. Here's what to know about the other main types and how they affect the brain. Alzheimer's disease is the most commonly diagnosed form of dementia, but it's far from the only one. In fact, most people who have dementia, including Alzheimer's, show signs of several different types of neurodegenerative disease in their brains. That can include the amyloid plaques and toe tangles that are hallmarks of Alzheimer's, damage to the brain's blood vessels, which is indicative of vascular dementia, and clumps of assorted other toxic proteins that cause Lewy body dementia, frontotemporal dementia, and late. If you look at the old people with dementia, what do they have? Well, they have a little bit of everything, said Dr. Costantino Idiacola, professor of neurology at Weill Cornell Medicine. A person's diagnosis largely depends on their main symptoms and what neurologists can see in their brain. While there aren't treatments yet to stop or reverse the progression of any form of dementia, experts say that getting an accurate diagnosis is important to help manage symptoms and know what to expect as the disease progresses. Here's an explainer on the other primary types, including how they affect the brain and their symptoms. For vascular dementia is the second most common kind of dementia. It can arise after a stroke, either one large one or several smaller ones, but more typically stems from long-term wear and tear on the brain's smaller blood vessels. Damage often occurs to the brain's white matter, the insulated nerve fibers that carry signals from one neuron to the next. Those fibers are the last stop for the smaller blood vessels. So if blood flow is occluded, it's the white matter that suffers first. When blood flow to the brain is disrupted, the brain cells are deprived of oxygen and nutrients, said Silvia Fossati, a professor of neurosciences at Temple University's Lewis Katz School of Medicine. One of the most common symptoms of vascular dementia is general cognitive and physical slowing. This likely occurs because the signals in the brain aren't moving as efficiently through the impaired white matter, Dr. Idiacola said. Other symptoms may include difficulty with decision-making, problem-solving, and task execution. Poor cardiovascular health, particularly high blood pressure, is the biggest risk factor. In fact, an important clue that someone has vascular dementia is a history of heart attack, stroke, or high blood pressure. An MRI can help confirm the diagnosis by revealing the white matter damage. As with any type of neurodegenerative disease, once brain cells are damaged, the symptoms are largely irreversible. But vascular dementia is more preventable than other forms of dementia. Let's try to keep the blood vessels healthy, Dr. Idiacola said. That's the best thing we can do right now. We know how to do that better than we know how to fight neurodegeneration. Lewy body dementia. This type can cause a constellation of symptoms involving the whole body. That's because it's not just something that affects the brain, it affects the nervous system in the periphery as well, said Dr. Sudha Seshadri, the founding director of the Glenn Biggs Institute for Alzheimer's and Neurodegenerative Diseases, at the University of Texas Health Science Center at San Antonio. Some people experience classic cognitive impairment, like problems with executive functioning, though memory loss is less common. Others have visual spatial difficulties, for example, struggling to locate items in a pantry or to judge distances. People may also have striking visual hallucinations. Physical issues can include constipation, difficulty urinating, lightheadedness when standing up, and in men, erectile dysfunction. Parkinson's disease symptoms can also occur, such as tremor, muscle rigidity, and difficulty with balance. The overlap with Parkinson's makes sense because the two conditions are caused by the same dysfunctional protein, alpha-synuclein. The protein clumps into so-called Lewy bodies inside neutrons, damaging and ultimately killing the cells. A person's symptoms depend on which areas of the brain are affected first and how the toxic protein spread. Doctors tend to rely on a person's symptoms to make a diagnosis, but that can be difficult because they're so different in different patients and are not always easy to recognize, said Dr. David Irwin, an associate professor of neurology at Penn Medicine. As a result, Lewy body dementia is thought to be underdiagnosed. Frontotemporal dementia. This type of dementia is rarer than the other forms, and it tends to emerge earlier in life, with people typically first experiencing symptoms in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. The brain's frontal lobe, as the name suggests, is one of the areas most affected. Cognitive symptoms often include difficulty with executive functioning, planning, or organizing. Those problems may become apparent if someone has trouble managing their finances or planning a trip, Dr. Irwin said. Dramatic personality changes can also occur. Some people become uninhibited and impulsive. They may approach strangers or make rude or inappropriate comments. People can also become apathetic or unmotivated or emotionally cold and distant. As a result, frontotemporal dementia, or FTD, is often initially misdiagnosed as a psychiatric condition, said Dr. Winston Chong, a professor of neurology at the University of California at San Francisco. A lot of the core symptoms get arbitrated to depression or mood or addiction or life events that cause people to behave differently, he said. Some people with FTD also experience primary progressive aphasia, or difficulty with speaking and comprehending language. In the brain, there are two main proteins that become dysfunctional and are associated with FTD. One is TDP-43, which is also involved in late, and also ALS. The other is tau, a different form of tau than the one implicated in Alzheimer's. Late or limbic predominant age-related TDP-43 is a relatively new dementia diagnosis. It first came to light roughly 20 years ago. Other scientists observed that many people who died with Alzheimer's symptoms had toxic clusters of the protein TDP-43 in their brains, sometimes in lieu of amyloid and tau, which sometimes in addition to them. As the acronym suggests, late is most common in the later decades. Dr. Peter Nelson, a professor of pathology at the University of Kentucky College of Medicine, said that roughly a third of people in their 80s and 90s have signs of the disease in their brains. As with Alzheimer's, the part of the brain most affected is the hippocampus, and memory loss is the most common symptom. On its own, late progresses slowly and is relatively benign, Dr. Nelson said. But people often have both late and Alzheimer's concurrently, which results in a more swift and severe clinical course, including anxiety, depression, hallucinations, and delusions. There isn't a blood test for TDP-43, so doctors can only make a diagnosis based on a person's symptoms and by ruling out other forms of dementia. The disease is most commonly discovered during an autopsy. The first clinical trial for a treatment for late is currently underway. Next from the Times, why is everything Wrapped? Well, you can blame Spotify. The music streaming service is no longer the only company quantifying our social lives. As far as holiday traditions go, it may not reach as far back as Yule logs and wassail, but over the past decade, Spotify Wrapped, the streaming platform's annual summation of users' listening habits, has cemented its position as a digital cultural custom. Some users spend all year anticipating their results, thinking of it as their Super Bowl. Others try to game their outcomes to favor a particular artist or album. In 2023, users were baffled by the way Spotify sorted them into geographic regions by music tastes. Were you a Burlington, Vermont, or more of a Berkeley, California? Last year, some users were disappointed by the platform's AI-heavy offering. This year, Wrapped, which was released on Wednesday, includes a new feature that shows the top listeners of certain artists how their listening time ranks against other superfans. I saw mine today for the very first time ever. I didn't even know they did this. The end of the year review space is getting crowded, though. Seemingly everything is getting wrapped up these days. From the books you read to the takeout you ordered, the gimmick of packaging user data into cutesy graphics ripe for sharing has become ubiquitous thanks largely to Spotify. Wrapped has become like Kleenex, a now generic word that has come to stand for a broad category of product. In recent years, Duolingo has told users how much time they spent learning languages. Food-related platforms like Reese, Seamless, and even McDonald's have detailed dining habits. And Steam, the gaming platform, told users how much time they spend playing video games, how many achievements they unlocked, and other fun numbers. Strava, the fitness app, added together user workouts, and Partyful, the event invitation service, let partygoers know how many events they attended. Spotify, for its part, is not worrying much about competition. Payman Kassery, the service's global brand director, said in an interview, he noted a feature that tells users their so-called listening age based on their musical interests. This year, there was also an animated feature that shows a user's top artists sprinting across the screen, racing for the number one spot. Charmingly creative or not, as more platforms roll out data-backed retrospectives, users are starting to notice all that information adding up. We have fitness watches and rings that allows us to track our every move. Do we need the metrics for our social lives too? I feel like it's been a 3-year period now where it's like, oh my God, I don't need my dentist emailing me about my year in review. Anna Sinceria, a copywriter who lives in Portland, Oregon, joked. End-of-year roundups no longer hit like they used to, Ms. Sincera, 35, said. As users have become more aware of the marketing mechanics at play, she added, the regurgitation of the data that they store on you has lost its shine. She still looks forward, though, to her annual data from Goodreads, whose year in books has typically told readers how many books they read and tallied how many pages they turned. These features are partly a result of the large volume of personal data people generate every day, said Jeremy Morris, a professor of media and cultural studies at the University of Wisconsin at Madison. We don't have the time to parse through all these things, so now we have systems that are sort of playing on that nostalgia, he said. For some, the barrage of information about themselves can be anxiety-inducing. I feel like the data turns my private habits into a public scoreboard, said Al Belando, age 32, a freelance content producer who lives in Manhattan. Sometimes she feels boxed in by the algorithms that fuel many of these platforms, she added. While these yearly digital debriefs can serve as a mirror of users' tastes in music, food, and events, some are starting to question whether that taste is truly their own, all too aware of the algorithms that can shape their choices. Caitlin Begg, the founder of Authentic Social, an applied research lab focused on sociology and technology, described a phenomenon she calls the algorithmization of everyday life explaining that these patterns and repetitive behaviors can be more indicative of convenience than they are of determined choice. Did you, say, listen to that indie band this year because you loved its sound, or because its song automatically started playing after a Taylor Swift album? Speaking from a landline, Ms. Begg, age 31, explained she makes it a point to intentionally seek out analog experiences to avoid the prediction algorithm. Interesting. There are still plenty of people, though, who look forward to their personalized years in review. The information exists, holding the potential for self-knowledge. How could they not check it out? Scott Knobloch, who lives in Pensacola, Florida, said he spent 2025 trying to top his Spotify records from the previous year when he listened to music on the service for 345,106 minutes. For Mr. Knobloch, age 48, who works in water utilities, Spotify Wrapped data sometimes is not granular enough. He uses his third-party platform called Stats.fm to keep track of additional data and create a sort of Wrapped for his annual Wrap, he said. Wow. You will not find me without an earbud in the ear, he said. That's me. That's the center of my world. So now we're going to wrap this one up. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the December 3rd issue of the New York Times. Your reader has been Chuck Stevens. As always, thank you for listening.